Hello, I'm Nick Lyons, Head of Product Marketing from Panaseer, and I'm here today to talk with Dave Ferguson, who is the CISO of the Bank of England. I'm really looking forward to this because if you follow Dave on LinkedIn, you'll notice he always has good opinions on things. And for me, the thing I enjoy is Dave often says things that people are thinking but don't necessarily want to say. Dave goes ahead and says them. So I think this could be an exciting webinar. Dave, do you want to quickly introduce yourself? I realise I probably
Cool, Nick. No, thank you very much. I'll caveat what you said. I'm Deputy CISO of Bank. I play wingman to Jono, who takes the real sort of brunt of everything. And I think you're right. I've tried to make an assertive effort over the last couple of years to share my thoughts and opinions, mostly because I do believe we're a community that will grow stronger if we work together. And I'd love to kind of dive into this. Been in cyber now for about 17 years. Entered there as a developer for IBM, very quickly became an ethical hacker and kind of grew up as a techie into sort of senior management leadership. So definitely happy with the nuts and bolts. But no, thanks for sending me the paper. And I definitely agree with quite a few things you're saying.
Indeed. So yeah, thank you for mentioning the paper. The paper is a thing we've done with Dark Reading, which is it's quite provocatively titled, which is Control Failures, the cybersecurity industry's dirty little secret. Again, it is admittedly provocative. What do you think of that when we say something like that? You know, when Dark Reading is saying that control failures really are a dirty little secret. Is that your view, your perception? What do you think?
So I think it's a great hook. I mean, that's your kind of lead to get people to click, isn't it? It's like, come to the dirty secret of cybersecurity. I think, truth be told, that there's lots of secrets in cybersecurity. And I think sometimes we're not as sort of honest with people as we should be because we don't quite understand how to articulate the risk to the right people to kind of drive the right actions. And because of that, we kind of glance over a few things. I know in your paper, I think you say that you believe kind of we own a lot of tools at the moment, but I think it's like you say 79% of enterprises were victims of cyber incidents, which could have been avoided largely because their controls were ineffective at the time. So if you had spent a little bit more time kind of getting what you have right, rather than looking at what new shiny thing you could buy, you could potentially be in a better place. I don't disagree with that, but actually, I think I've read recent papers, and I think it was by Microsoft, that suggest the numbers are a little bit higher. And I think Microsoft say that the failure in security fundamentals attributes to like 90% of security breaches. And I think they call security fundamentals sort of misconfiguration, poor patching, and sort of poor authentication setup. And I kind of classify controls as kind of that bucket as well, which fits into this space.
No, I'd agree with you actually, Dave. So I was, again, it's not about me. I was with Microsoft for 10 years and in the security domain for 5 with them. The most recent digital defense report, I think, is exactly saying that. It's saying, one thing I'm really pleased they've done is they've stopped saying basic cyber hygiene and they've talked about foundational cyber hygiene can help protect against 99% of attacks. And I think that's, you know, that is almost exactly what we're saying too. It's same thing expressed slightly differently. So the 80% or 79% that we've got in our report is from people telling us that they were surprised by something that they had a control. They've spent the money on the tool, they've got the control, but it wasn't in place correctly throughout the whole of the estate, which is why ultimately they've had an incident.
Yeah.
Agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think Microsoft's approach of saying, you know, get the fundamentals right is critical. The thing I noticed is Microsoft's evolution of the fundamentals has been really quite, what they're saying is basic or what they're saying is now fundamental has shifted quite a lot in the last 4 years. The point is that what Microsoft say and what I think the industry thinks is fundamental is actually really, really difficult to do for starters because it's quite badly defined. And secondly, getting it right on any sort of scale is exceptionally hard because you need to know what the things that you're trying to protect are. And again, what we've found, and I think what the security leaders peer report has found, is that you're actually starting off, if you don't know what your assets are, and I know that's very boring thing. If you don't know what you're trying to protect, whether that's your identities, whether it's your assets, whether it's your compute assets or whatever, you're actually not in a great place, because you're starting off from saying, right, we've got these many things in our configuration management database. We've got this many things that the SIM has seen events from. We've got this many things that that our intrusion detection systems found. We've got this many things that the vuln scanners picked up on the network passively. So trying to get that, start off from that single point of truth around your asset inventory, which isn't at all sexy when it comes to cybersecurity. It's not the image of chasing a hacker in his darkened room, hacking away by the light of a green screen through the network. It's almost going around and checking you've got all of the buildings you know about, for starters, and all the windows and all the doors and all the cameras and all the access control stuff that you've got on your physical security is there. It's the equivalent of walking around and tapping things with your night torch almost to check it's working.
No, I think you're right. I think it's unfortunate that kind of doing the hygiene, which I largely cast as the stuff that really matters, doesn't have kind of the sexy factor to it. I think if you're looking kind of the detect and response space, that typically look more grandiose and sexy. And I do want to kind of touch on that a little bit later, because I do think we need to kind of, I don't know, bring the sexiness back to kind of security fundamentals. Because if you're looking at effectively what is the first principles approach to security, I think that actually starts with the fundamentals. But to loop back to an earlier word you said, and that was scale. And I think scale for me is incredible, because it takes something very, very simple, you scale it up, and it becomes incredibly complicated. The way I kind of talk to our team, and it's a simplified statement of the scale, but if you're talking about control effectiveness for a moment, if you have 1,000 laptops, each laptop has hundreds of configurations. Each laptop then needs, say, 30 patches each and every month. And your organization is probably going to receive about 35,000 emails. Your employees are probably going to browse 50,000 web pages in a day. And then 8% of your workforce is going to leave over any given year. And then over a 10-year period, you're probably going to have all of it compound with some obsolescence, and your organization's priorities are going to fluctuate. It's like, you have a very difficult job. Yes. Your role within cyber is to ensure security hygiene is not just good today, but security hygiene has the sustainability and resilience to kind of last over that period. So one of the things I like to kind of talk to everybody about is, with that problem statement and that sort of scale, mistakes are going to happen. It's inevitability. You can't avoid it. So when you understand mistakes are going to happen, how do you ensure that you start to build an architecture of systems right? How do you start to kind of ensure that you start with your defense in depth approach? And then how are you becoming aware of what is the lifespan of your control? And what I mean by that is, fortunately, well, I hope at least you've adopted defense in depth, and you've got a couple of layers between the things you care about and the things that you don't trust. But within that, you've got to sort of contend with kind of the misconfiguration of those controls. You need to think that at some point in that sort of problem statement, they're going to become neglected. And the other thing that I don't think cyber really kind of do a good job of educating, I would say, technology in the business, is the business have become cognizant that technology does age and it has a shelf life before it becomes obsolescence and kind of starts breaking a little bit. Within cyber, we have that problem, but we have compounded that problem by having an active adversary that is engineering against our controls. So you'll typically find the shelf life of any given control today will not have the same effectiveness as it will in 2 or 3 years' time, if be effective at all. So that's actually one of the really interesting things that draws me to this space, is because on the surface, security hygiene looks like a simplified problem. But then when you start to expand it up and you layer on the technology complexity, the politics, the people, and everything else, you end up in a really interesting place where you've got to actually start pulling on a lot of levers to ensure that you get it right.
It's interesting. There's so many things to unpack in there, Dave, that you probably saw me nodding ahead again with. But yeah, I think the last two things you said there were the politics and people. And ultimately, what we're trying to do here is get people to change.
Yeah.
People don't like to change sometimes. So I've seen some interesting strategies that CISOs have deployed to try and, force a change. One of which, a high-risk strategy, a large global multinational, the board were resisting pushing out MFA is what I'd heard. The way the CISO dealt with that is they had managed devices, so complete management of phones. They pushed out the authenticator app to phones and then turned on MFA for the board.
Yeah.
And again, I would not advocate doing that. That is almost the antithesis of change management. But it did get the board over the hump of saying we can't do this because it's going to impact people's productivity, because it didn't impact theirs. They actually had a better experience, and then were able to, see the benefits of multi-factor authentication. The CISOs managed to take a massive risk off their piece, and they've gone through that without actually having to have the breach, that oh goodness moment that is what typically is a forcing function for a lot of cybersecurity. So there's many different things I think in there, but for me, politics and people play a big part, and sometimes it's getting people on board, and sometimes it's actually doing things with, sometimes it's doing things too, which again is a horrible message to sort of deliver, but you're accountable for security as a CISO. You need to do what you need to do sometimes. I think there's there's many interesting things you said in there, and the point you were making around defense in depth, I think was absolutely spot on. The other aspect one of the aspects that Microsoft talks about for zero trust, they talk about verify explicitly, which you mentioned, least standing privilege, so basically reducing what people do on a day-to-day basis. But the third thing is assuming breach, so minimizing the blast radius. And I absolutely agree. That's got to be in your design principles. I'm not sure it has been, and trying to retrofit that is an interesting and challenging problem for anyone. So, yeah.
I'm with you now. It's like, and I think that's one of the key things that I always like to get over to people. It's like, all of your controls will fail. All of your people will make mistakes. All of your suppliers will let you down at some point. It's like, it's all about, as you say, the blast radius and engineering and resilience, so that when these things do occur, because they will, that you can still operate and fulfill all of your duties to your stakeholders. And that's really kind of key. You also mentioned on sort of getting people to do the right thing. This is where I always think, again, as a technologist growing up in this world, just trying to understand the business language and everything, I didn't appreciate just how much psychology can play and give to us. So I've always found people are generally very reasonable. They just need to really understand why you're asking them to do something. And then they need to appreciate that the ask is reasonable against the threats and the various things they're trying to weigh up. And I find that we make life too complicated sometimes. But if we can eventually get somebody to understand why they need to do something, then things typically click into place. Because if we can make them care, then half the battle's already won.
I completely agree with that, and I think one of the drums that I constantly beat is that one of the biggest challenges with cybersecurity, not sure if it's a dirty little secret or not, just come back to that theme, but it's actually change management. And to your point, getting people to the understand of the why. And for me, the ProSci methodology is perfect for that. It's a simple way that 5-letter acronym of ADKAR, which is awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. That is so fundamental to what cybersecurity needs to do and needs to consider when we start to say we're going to do things to people. We need to, yes, there's awareness there, but for me, you need to create that desire. Things like using biometrics for login. That sounds like, oh, that's scary. It's you mean you're taking my fingerprint, you've got my retina scan. Actually, no, let's explain to you why it's going to be better. And if you've got concerns about privacy, they've all been done to death. So let's explain that too, but let's show you why this is going to be a better experience, rather than saying we're starting off and disrupting the way that you work. So there's definitely an education piece, I think, that
I love that. For me, bringing biometrics into the workplace, providing we do it in a mindful way, actually makes everyone's lives better.
Okay.
It simplifies the user experience. And I think far too often as well, cyber is seen as the department that takes away from user experience or introduces friction. I think one of the things that we need to be better at over the next kind of decade is using the new technologies and the learnings that we have to actually give back to the enterprise. And we should spend a significant amount of time understanding how can we streamline, how can we give back, how can we introduce sort of efficiencies into the work process in a safe way. Yeah, I do think that's actually quite an interesting thing and something that I think is a topic to itself, but I would love to kind of see people spend a bit more time on that.
Yeah.
Spoken quite a bit about kind of the problem statements, and I think the problem is inevitable. For me, the fun thing then is like, how do we go about fixing this?
Yep.
Because I class it as a simple, complex problem, such as if you make it one of one, it's quite simple, but you scale it up and you get all the great complexities. The way we've kind of approached it in our organization is we've taken a very collaborative approach. And for me, it's all about collaboration, because typically within cybersecurity, you don't have a mutually beneficial dictatorship on your side. Everything is really about relationships and mastering the art of kind of influencing. And what I've kind of found from that is relationships will typically get you in the door, but very quickly you need to back up your ask with evidence. The people that trust you need to understand that what you're saying is a real thing. And then once you've told them it's a problem, the next natural question is going to be, well, what can I do? How do I kind of push forward with this? And what I think has been so difficult in this space is we're dealing with very, very big numbers. We're dealing with lots of different data. It's typically disconnected. It's typically not well thought out when it's given to the end of the person. And as a result, you end up with a lost in translation problem where the engineers are trying to talk to the people that can do something about it. And either the data is not applicable to them or the data doesn't help them make the right decisions. But that confusion itself actually causes a lot of friction in the whole sort of process getting fixed. So what we spent a significant amount of time doing in our organization is we understood we were very data rich, but that data wasn't translating into what I call kind of intelligent actions. So what we decided is we needed the technology to enable people to believe that processes can change. And that's really just a fancy way of saying like it's all about technology, people, and process to introduce some sort of cultural change. And for us, that started by actually bringing all the data together. We're a really, really data-rich organization. But if you looked at our data, it was in lots of different places. So we brought it together and we did exactly what you said, is like we started off by understanding what we have. We actually built our own CMDB alongside the organization. And the reason for that is we had a lot of agent data, we had a lot of telemetry data, we had a lot of scene data. Like we're really data rich. And actually when we brought that together, we could quickly understand like what coverage do we have? What was the operational sort of stuff? The trick then is it has no context. You want to start giving the right data to the right people. Otherwise, you enter into the it's not my problem. So how do we then kind of process that data and turn it into intelligent actions? And kind of what I mean by intelligent actions is it's the right information for the right person to drive an action that you know will make a difference. And that was really the kind of start of our journey, is kind of putting things into the right places. Once we understood that we had the right information, I kind of classify that as the technology sort of side of things. We then needed to kind of really change the people in the process. And we actually put an entire campaign around kind of taking these tools, these reports, and this data, which was all live, to the various teams around the organization that could actually affect various things. So as you would expect, like we would monitor full patch compliance, but we're not responsible for patching. That might be the enterprise networking team, or that might be the server team, or that might be the desktop and computing team. It's like there's 3 teams there that you need to get patching right, and you're effectively playing the second line to ensure they do it properly. And we're kind of enabling them with all these tools. So effectively what we did is we didn't ask them to do something. We worked with them as a collaborative with giving them the right data. We provided them a tremendous amount of support when putting it through. And then the other great thing that I think we don't do enough of is actually saying thank you and celebrating support, or celebrating sort of success.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is cyber are too quick to say you're bad, or cyber are too quick to say, didn't we do a great thing? But actually, if cyber has enabled, say, the enterprise team to kind of patch all the desktops and come sort of within, to become top 2% in the world, I want to celebrate them. I want the entire organization to know that that team did an amazing thing, and aren't they brilliant? Because hell, they deserve it. They put in the work. And at the end of the day, that kind of builds the positivity loop where everyone starts to then trust cyber, everyone wants to work with cyber, everyone understands cyber is basically helping the organization kind of be better. And for us, we've kind of taken that same approach across all of our control framework. It's really about collecting as much data as you can, processing in a meaningful way, and then putting in front of the right people to allow them to do the right things, and then really celebrating their success. And then on the flip side, we actually do something quite cheeky as well, which is the data we'll publish quite wide from the organization, details everyone's successes, but actually it gives a true representation of where everyone is, and nobody wants to be the 10% that's amber. And that in itself actually pulls people up as well. So giving that kind of like little bit of peer acknowledgement of where things are really, really, really does help. And that's the way that we've spent a significant amount of time of taking the data about our control sets, really having them be a sustainable part of change. And ultimately what we're trying to do there is just eliminate silos completely. So we see ourselves as one big team of cyber kind of working with technology to ensure that things are done in a streamlined kind of efficient way.
Thank Dave. That's incredible. What you have just described is exactly what we try and help people to do. And I don't want to sound too overtly salesy, but that again, that very basic things like there's a few things. So much you said there.
Yeah.
But they're starting off from you built your own CMDB almost separate from, I guess, your IT organization's got a CMDB which doesn't meet the needs of cyber because it's not necessarily accurate, it's not necessarily up to date, it's probably not got control information in it and control status information in it. So I'm assuming that's where you built that.
I've never found an organization, and I've been around to more than 3 or 4 dozen that has a perfect CMDB. So we should stop penalizing and trying to kind of perfect that. It's really about understanding, do you have the right data to do the right things? And
absolutely. Yep.
Typically within your organization, data exists in weird places that you don't realize. One of the examples I always give is people are like, well, how many servers do we have? Like, find me the server information. And they go for these weird convoluted ways of finding server information. The reality of it is, like, run over to VMware ESX and just ask it, like, how many VMs do we have spun up? What's drawing power? Like, there's loads of data in the organization. We just need to kind of step back and sensibly and think about, like, where can we collect it from? And that's what we try to do. So if you bring all of that stuff together, you start to get a really good picture of what your organization is really doing, rather than what the business analysts have kind of put into the system.
Yeah, agreed. I think the second point you make there is you then need to have the context. So you turn from, again, what that being a data geek, but you turn from having just data into information.
Yeah.
By adding purpose, by knowledge, by adding the context. And once you've got that, that's when you can get the wisdom. That's where you can help people to understand, you know, yes, you're driving accountability out, but that data is giving, or that knowledge is giving someone the ability to go and do something with it. And it's interesting because certainly the experience we've had with our clients is you go ahead and you tell them how many assets they've got by doing all the magic stuff that we do. And the first reaction is almost one of, it's almost like the grief cycle. So shock, anger, rejection, acceptance. Yeah. You say, actually, you thought you had 20,000 endpoints on your network. It looks like you've got 32,000. Like, we haven't, no chance. Then you need to go through the proof. Then you need to get people comfortable to the point, okay, that looks about right. Then the acceptance, what do you do about it? And that's when, if you don't have context, what we've found, it's like you've just given someone an enormous problem without context, that they now need to do all these things that you've mentioned around patching, which different people are accountable for different parts of patching to. exactly. You've always described the problem statement that we try and solve.
You're right. Context is everything. Context is absolutely everything. And then I want people to go one step beyond context, and that's kind of intelligently processing the data.
Yeah.
I think there's quite a few tools that are now available to us in, say, the realms of machine learning or sort of graph databases, that once you introduce enough context and data, you can actually turn from a data dump of here are 5,000 actions that you have to do, which is data overload to a person. They'll actually contribute. These are the most risky things that exist in your organization at the moment, because they tack onto the stuff that you really, really care about. And we know because of threat information that these are actively being targeted. Do these things. It's like that for me is the real key, because people then really start to appreciate that what they're doing makes a difference, and you actively start to move the needle. So you've gone from data to like real intelligence that has context and meaning for your organization. It's just an absolute game changer for the industry, but you don't see enough people doing it.
Yeah, I think that's, that's when you go from the, oh goodness, we've got an extra 12,000 devices. If you can instantly then say, of those 12,000, 100 have got a routable IP address, they've got an external IP address. 17 of those have actually got a critical vulnerability that is exploitable, that's known in the KEV database as an example. And of those 17, 3 have a local domain admin account enabled on them.
Yeah.
That's when you can say, do you know what? I've gone from having 12,000 problems to having 3 things that I'm going to stop this call right now and go and do, frankly.
Yeah, but I would layer onto that even more. So you've got your 12,000 devices. I would argue that only 10% of that actually supports mission critical.
Absolutely, yes.
Within production. And you'll probably find the other 90% is humans, UAT, sandboxes, experiments, all the stuff that you're going to need to have your organization run over any long period of time. But only 10% of your estate probably needs to operate at this very moment in order to kind of meet your duties as an organization. And I also find that's the other layer to kind of like put on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely. The business context in which it's operating. So the actual business processes it's supporting. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, Dave, because that's exactly what we do. And I don't want to turn it into a sales call, but yeah, what you've described again is pretty much what we try and take people through. And yeah, I guess the thing that we haven't discussed really is how do you measure this sort of stuff? So with you as a CISO, what do you do? Again, those 12,000 things, that 32,000 device base you've suddenly discovered. What is it that you then need to report? You need to talk about to your stakeholders, and what approach do you take to providing that evidence or providing that information?
It depends on the audience.
Right.
And what I mean by that is from the metrics that we produce, we'll take the same data and refine it in a different way depending on whether or not we're talking to, say, operations, middle management, executive management, or top leadership. It's all the same data that powers that sort of reporting, but it's effectively tuned in a different way.
Yeah.
And it will be tuned in a way that actually means the most to the audience member at the time. And what I mean by that is operations teams want to understand, what do I need to do to make things better? It's like they are not time rich and they want to kind of do the right thing. You kind of step up to middle management and you'll notice middle management is typically responsible for a critical process or a critical system. They want to understand, does that exist within risk tolerance? And that is typically a compounded metric of a lot of different things, both social and technical, kind of brought together in a meaningful way that allows them to understand, are we good or do we need to delve deeper into certain sort of places? And then as we start to step up the organization as well, we need to take a more macro approach to risk. And you start to introduce a lot more things. It's not just about, is the mission statement correct? Is the organization correct? What is our threat landscape or the external sort of acting forces? It becomes very, very different. It becomes more of a sort of a narrative and a story, so that we understand, like, are we doing the right thing today to protect the organization against the threat landscape? And do we have the correct strategy to protect the organization over the coming sort of weeks, months, and years? And I would say we start with the same pool of data, but it's really about understanding who's your audience, what do they need to accomplish, and how do you have them kind of walking out of that room, A, knowing what is the right thing to do, or B, feeling confident that you're the right team to kind of lead the journey for the next kind of week, month, and year. But yeah, for me, it's mostly about understanding your audience and what keeps them awake at night.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Thank you for that. I mean, that's great insight, great to hear. Again, it sounds like you almost, again, don't want to put words in your mouth here, but the idea of different dashboards, different reports for different users, everyone's got their own buttons that they need to push, that they need to be happy with.
Absolutely.
Everyone's got things that are keeping them awake at night, which is a phrase that, if it hadn't come from you, I would avoid using.
Yeah, it's the same fundamental truth. It's distilled in different ways, and there's different lenses to kind of really target the right people. Again, I always like to work backwards whenever I kind of push a report out. I don't think of something nice and push it out because it's pretty. I think, what do I want to achieve, and what actions do I want to drive? How is the world going to be a better place in the future if I can achieve X outcome against this person? Okay, what information is the right information to give to that person to help them understand the problem, and then bring them on the journey to kind of help things become better. So there's a little bit of reverse engineering there. It's like I worry about people that produce metrics and they're like, hey, I did a thing. It's like, great. Like, why are we looking at this? What do we hope to achieve from this?
Yeah, I think for me I completely agree. I think for me the foundational point of this is that the information that you've got is doing a lot of heavy lifting. You are building everything on top of that information. If that information, which starts off with your asset inventory, it starts off with your control status, if that's not accurate, then you are on a house of cards. So I mean, how do you approach data trust in this instance? Or
so data, typically when you start to pull lots of things together, you'll find there's a lot of complementing data. And the bulk of the trust would typically gravitate towards one thing. So for data trusting, I think once you've got a bulk of data and you can trend the data, you can very quickly understand if it starts to go a little bit skewed, or the sort of typical outliers. And those are ways of kind of refining the model. But typically, once you start to get a lot of data together and you're looking at trends, you can get a lot of confidence quite quickly. I've only got 4 minutes before I have to immediately dash. But I'll kind of close on one of the things that I think this is all about: creating a secure culture within the organization. And for me, it's not about security versus tech or anybody else. It is really about working seamlessly with all the organizations and celebrating the success that you can kind of do. And that's really the way kind of culture sticks. The other thing that I'm a big believer on at the moment is the best way to really prevent ransomware and security breaches is not to buy more sort of detection and reaction tools, but to really be consistent with the security fundamentals. I joke sometimes, and it is a joke, but I often think that the SOP treats the symptoms, whereas good engineering and consistent behaviors fixes the problems. And for me, that's kind of my first principles approach to cyber. Like, how can we do the right things, get the best bang for our buck? And it all starts at the beginning. So I appreciate kind of detection response as the sexier side of things, and it gets all the great things. But we do need to kind of bring some sexy back to security engineering and security fundamentals, because that's where you really make the biggest difference.
And on that point, I think that is almost the perfect message to end on, Dave, because I wholeheartedly agree. Shifting stuff to fix it early on, fix that exposure rather than focus on the indicator of compromise that then's happened. That, if we can do that, if we can make that sexy, bring sexy back to in Timberlake, I think that is absolutely what we as the... I
don't know how we bring the sexy back, but I'm going to put that on you, Nick. How do we bring more people into this space and have them believe that this is how they can make the best difference for the organization?
Perfect, Dave. Thank you very much for this. Thank you for your time. I hope this has been interesting, and thank you for everyone that's been watching this.
Anytime. Cheers all.
Cheers.